Hey, we're in the final Haftarah for Genesis. This is Vayechi, and it's First Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Now, this Haftarah actually finishes kind of what was started back in Kai Sarah, the life of Sarah, if you remember that one. That was the soap opera of David's last days and Bathsheba's role in securing the kingdom that it would be for Solomon, right? So that Haftarah ended at 1 Kings chapter 1, and here we pick up the narrative in chapter 2. So in this Haftarah, we've got David's parting words to a son and heir, which is Solomon, right? And this includes some instructions having to do with delicate matters related to the kingdom that need to be attended to after David's death. Now, the main tie-in with the Torah portion is that in both of them we have an impending death of a father. In the Torah portion, we've got Israel, otherwise known as Jacob, and it says that Israel's days were drawing toward death. And in the Haftarah, it says David's days were drawing toward death. Now, if you remember back in that Haftarah, the life of Sarah, that's where we learned that speaking about one's days coming to God means one's deeds, whether they're coming willingly to God or hesitantly, based on whether or not those days were filled with good deeds, mitzvahs, or not. So here in this Haftarah, we have the idea that one's days, or the ability to do good in the world, to do that which one is sent here to do, we have the idea that the days of David were drawing to a close. So I wonder, a person's days come to an end, but the person lives on. I wonder if this is a hint of resurrection. Maybe. But certainly in terms of like a surface reading, we've got a generational significance that's being talked about here. As long as Jacob's children, as long as David's children are alive, and the generations that they gave rise to are keeping covenant with God, then it is as if Jacob or David are still alive, right? Now, the other thing that I want to point out about David's death is that it doesn't say King David's days were drawing to a close, right? It says David's days. And there's a midrash that teaches that there's no rulership on the day of death. It's the person dying, not the kingdom. And this could be why it was important for David on his deathbed to instruct Solomon in the way that he did, because the kingdom needed to be preserved. So because the kingdom needed to be preserved, there's some loose ends that David needs Solomon to take care of. And perhaps it was done to ensure that there would be no rebellion or potential usurpers for the throne after David's gone. So David wants to leave Solomon with a strong, uncontested monarchy, right? So he leaves instructions to make 2 people pay for their crimes and 1 person to be rewarded for their loyalty. There's something else that David tells Solomon, and that's something that kind of struck me the most, I think, this week. David tells Solomon, you should be strong and you should be a man. Now, when I read that, my mind was suddenly transported back to an image, a picture that I had seen once of little John F. Kennedy Jr., who was 3 years old at the time that his father died, President Kennedy. So the funeral was 3 days after the assassination in Dallas, and that day, the funeral was little John Jr.'s third birthday. So there they all were outside St. Matthew's Cathedral, and everyone was heading out to Arlington Cemetery for the burial, and little John Jr. raises his tiny little hand. Remember that? No, maybe it's this way. Raises his tiny little hand, and he gives a military salute to his father. And that picture was captured, and that moment in history was born. Be a man, little John Jr., right? Well, what people later learned was that little John Jr. had, when they were in the church, when they were in the cathedral, he had been really upset, obviously, and he was crying, wondering where his dad is during that Catholic Mass. And he was apparently taken to another room to calm down. And then there was a Secret Service agent there that was like helping him perfect his little salute. So, the famous picture of him saluting, this is after the Mass. They're outside the cathedral. President Kennedy's coffin is driving by, and then little John gives that famous salute. Be a man, little John Jr. So my first thought was, is this kind of what David is asking of Solomon? And it said that Solomon at this particular time was a teen. He was like a teenager. So is David saying something like, son, I'm about to die, but be strong and be a man? And if we look at this through our modern lenses, we might think that's what's going on. And maybe we'd be tempted to throw out phrases like, oh, that's toxic masculinity, right? Because we know that hiding one's real feelings, especially sorrow, is rampant in our modern world, especially among men. Toughen up is the rally cry. But is that what's going on here? Well, no, actually. So I read this really cool commentary from First Fruits of Zion on this Haftarah portion. And they bring some insight into this. And they said that this particular commentary, called the Targum Yonatan, has a translation of this First Kings. And they say that it means more like to be a man who fears sins. Okay, so be strong, be encouraged, and be a man who fears sins, not toughen up. Be a man and conquer your evil inclination. So I'm thinking, oh, this takes us back to that dichotomy of Jacob and Esau, right? This takes us back to the garden, right? Animals and men were created on the same day. Only one has that divine spark of God breathed in them. My husband likes to refer to it as, you have the animals, day 6, 1.0, and then you have man, day 6, 2.0, right? So what's really going on here is David is encouraging Solomon, and he's saying, don't forget you're human. So in the ancient times, to be a man or a human didn't mean to quell one's emotions. Okay? And my goodness, if you just read any of David's Psalms, you know that he was a man full of the full range of emotions, right? It meant to be a man, to be a woman, to be a human. It meant to be mature spiritually. And I found, Ephesians 4:13 to kind of sum this up really well. It says, grow to the measure of the stature that belongs to the fullness of Messiah. Well, Messiah had emotions, right? So with this encouragement, how about this week, you and I think about the legacy that we want to leave behind, whether that's for your children, if you have them, or really for anyone who's in your sphere of influence. Think about how God's light in you can shine through others even long after you're not on this earth anymore. And think about the importance of being that creation day 6 2.0 creature, the one with that divine spark or breath of God, striving toward God and not falling prey to just mere animal instincts. So, be a man, woman of God. And I'll see you next week.